The Prison Experience, the write-up in North Point, Chapter 14. By this time I had been at Blackburn for over 2 years. I got to know the place pretty good. Inmates came and went. Some of my inmate friends had made parole or had gotten shipped somewhere else. Blackburn was fun at times, but they also liked to make changes that would shake everything up. One had to be extra careful when new personnel came to work there. Going to the canteen and getting food was a break in the everyday prison routine. I liked the canteen workers. They were really nice to me. It was always a pleasure to speak a few words to Susie, Sarah, and Chelsea. I liked Sarah a lot. She reminded me of Sandy in a lot of ways. I knew by this time what I planned on doing when I got out of prison. I would have loved to have worked with Sarah and Chelsea. Chelsea looked like a bass player, and I thought Sarah could play keyboards and do some vocals. It was good to see them throughout the week, and I'm glad I got to meet them. Blackburn started changing. The librarian, Mr. Gorman, who I really liked, was retiring. I continued to work there as a clerk after his retirement for a while. The library went through a period of time when we had no librarian, and they were looking for a replacement. After some weeks, a female librarian was hired, and the library went through more changes. Other changes had happened as well. We got a new female warden and some new personnel and guards. So the normal routine of how things ran got changed somewhat. And I got my first major write-up over a letter I had written regarding the safety of my son. They hit me with a Category 3 type write-up, which would place me behind the fence. They also hit one of the legal aides who I had worked around in the legal office with a write-up. Not long after I got my write-up, and he too got shipped to North Point, the same place I did. Going to North Point was an experience that I won't forget. It was the worst 6.5 months that I did in prison. To start with, I was placed in one of the worst bays I could have been placed in. I had been used to the Blackburn way of doing things, and Blackburn was a cakewalk compared to North Point. At first, North Point seemed tough, but I had no trouble. However, everything was more restricted, and there were more inmates there than at Blackburn. North Point had inmates that were doing serious time. The Aussie syndrome also followed me there. I didn't know anyone there to start with, and I would hear things like, "Hey, they got Aussie in here," coming from inmates as I walked by. I kept to myself for the most part and tried not to do anything that would cause a problem. North Point had tall fences and razor wire, and I didn't want to spend any more time there than I had to. Due to the write-up, I would have to do around 6 months there before my security level would drop. Then I would go to a lower security prison, which became my goal. While at North Point, I scanned the postings on the wall for program info and such, and found that Miss Valentine also did programs there. I was a bit surprised. It's funny where you find people sometimes. However, North Point was not going to be a picnic for me. After a few weeks there, I ran into Brad, the legal aid guy that I'd worked with at Blackburn. He got me caught up to date on his situation. He was housed in a different dorm than I was, and eventually did some work at the North Point Library, which was drastically different than what we had at Blackburn Library. Doing anything at North Point took more time and was more restricted. Fights at North Point was a daily occurrence. At any given time, you would smell the pepper spray that the guards would use to break up a fight that had started. And I saw a lot of bruises on inmates and a lot of black eyes and such. It was bad. I tried to avoid the trouble, but trouble came my way over my shoes. I normally kept a pair of high-top Vietnam tennis shoes under the bottom bunk near my locker. I had a top bunk, and one night while asleep, someone stole my tennis shoes. I got up that morning and my shoes were gone. Putting on your shoes is one of the first things you do in the morning. Just about everyone kept their shoes under their bottom bunk. That was just normally where you'd keep them. At first I thought it was someone playing a joke and announced to the bay that I would like my shoes returned. I waited for a while and they never showed up. Luckily I had kept a worn out pair of the China version of high-top tennis shoes and had them stored in my locker. They were the first tennis shoes that I had bought when I arrived at Blackburn. If not for the backup tennis shoes, then I would have been shoeless. After my shoes got stolen, it made me pretty upset, as getting another pair is not so easy to get at a place like North Point. Anyway, I posted a return for a reward for my newer Vietnam pair. The Vietnam-made shoes had made it into the prison system around this time. They used to be made in China, but for whatever reason they were now being made in Vietnam. After posting a reward for the return of the shoes, I waited, and I would certainly have paid for them to be returned in the form of commissary or etc. Then one evening, after picking up my laundry and getting ready to place it to my locker, when my back turned, I got hit hard from behind, which caused me to fall. The guy from the shoe department was upon me, kicking and beating me before I knew what was going on. I was hit several times in the face and head with a combination lock from a locker. After it was over with, my Harley-Davidson prescription glasses were smashed. My hair had been pulled out and was in a tangled mess. I had a rib or two cracked, and I almost lost one of my eyes from being hit with the lock. I ended up going to the hole for a number of weeks, where I tried to heal up somewhat. It took some time for my ribs to heal, even after I left the hole. After doing the whole time, I was placed in a different dorm. I had to see a few people over the assault and feared that I would get a write-up for being assaulted. However, I didn't get written up and had to wear a pair of prison glasses that I had gotten at the fish tank when I first was classified. North Point was no fun at all. After being placed into the other base, some of the other inmates helped cut my hair, which had to be cut due to the tangled sticky mess that it was in. So for the second time, I got a haircut.